in the audience. Okay. All right, well, I'm Wayne Burdick, N6KR, co-founder of Elecraft and CTO, and the guy who gets to have fun, like designing new stuff. Louder? How's that? Okay. All right. Thank you all for turning out and for your interest in this. So I'm going to talk about really two things here. So ever since I was a little kid, I've kind of been on two tracks. One is adventure travel, hiking, being outdoors, being in nature. I was in Boy Scouts. My dad was an academic, and so every summer we would have plenty of time to go traveling, and probably by the time I was 10, I'd been to all the lower 48 states, and then when I was 15, I went to Alaska, and later on to Hawaii. So I've been all around the country and other places in the world, and that's the first track, is just getting out there. But the other track is, probably starting from when I was 7 years old, I started ripping radios apart. Did anybody else in here ever rip radios apart when you were a kid? Oh my God, wow, okay, wow, vandals. So fortunately all the ones I ripped apart were already broken. But I've kind of spent the rest of my career putting them back together, and hopefully in ways that nobody has seen before, and that's kind of Elecraft's business model is, like, what are we going to do that is different and actually solves a problem? The problem in this case is, how do you operate HF just as conveniently as people operate VHF and UHF? Like, shouldn't we HF guys have a handheld? So I want you to just imagine that you have traveled to an interesting place, and you wake up in the morning and you look out through this picture window, and what you see is some kind of a beautiful vista. It might be mountains, it might be deserts, it might be this place. This is Trona Pinnacles down near Death Valley, which I highly recommend. But because we're amateur radio operators, we also have another way of seeing. We can actually see the electromagnetic spectrum, or in our case, we're usually listening to the electromagnetic spectrum. That's our superpower, right? So we can see like everybody else does, but we can also hear that spectrum. So this talk is kind of like, how can we facilitate the adventure travel while simultaneously dabbling in this notion of dipping into the ionosphere, into the HF world at a moment's notice with opportunistic endeavor, which is what I really like to do. I call it opportunistic adventure HF. So this is one of my favorite quotes. If there is a place and you can get to it, you must operate from there. I mean, just the sheer genius banality of that quote just never fails to entertain me. This was from Adrian Weiss, W0RSP, who was one of the founders of QRP ARCI. I don't even know if Adrian's still around, but he was a great guy and kind of the Yogi Berra of amateur radio. So that's me using a KX2 right there. I'm actually perched somewhere up on San Bruno Mountain, just south of San Francisco. That's San Francisco in the background, and that's typically the kind of operating I do. And I wear that shirt too. So this is going to be part travelogue. I'm going to show you some of my favorite pictures of places where I have been and where I have operated, and my goal here is to inspire you to get out of the shack. Like most amateur radio companies, it's all about keeping you in the shack. I want to get you out of the shack. And a large part of our product line is dedicated to that. And so I'm going to talk about, just because this is not a strictly commercial pitch here. This is all about portable operating in the field with the lightest possible equipment that still embodies the kind of flexibility that you need to actually be effective at communicating. But getting there, is really half the fun. It's about the road, it's about camping, it's about hiking. How many people have a travel vehicle of some kind that you take out? How many people go hiking or camping? Oh man, yeah, I'm preaching to the choir here. So here's a couple of pictures of places where I've been. This is, the thing I like about this photo is that I think I may be the first person to ever capture the leaning tower of Pisa aspect of the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge that most people never notice, but lining it up with the trees. I highly recommend this hike from Sutro Baths to the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a few miles, it's beautiful. And if the wind's not blowing too hard, it's a great place to operate from too. On the left, that's a little slice of Devil's Slide out on Highway 1. And these are Pride of Madeira plants. They're exotic, but this is half the fun, is like finding new stuff, new plants, new animals, avoiding tourists, avoiding rangers. On the right here, we have a scene from when I lived on the East Coast, and same thing, you know, it's like, where can you go to get simultaneously the best vista and also some great spectrum? On the top there we have Mono Lake, which is, I highly recommend everybody go there just to see the brine shrimp and the tufa formations. June Lake is just a little bit south of there. This is just a gorgeous place. It's otherworldly and a fun place to operate from, especially when you're on your way through Tuolumne Meadows. That's a great place to stop and operate. At the bottom, can't remember where that is, but I think my son took that photo. We like to pull off on the side of the road and find pieces of freeway that have been lost. You know, like when you're going up Highway 50 to Lake Tahoe, there are places where if you look off on the side, you're gonna see a piece of old freeway, and sometimes you can pull off and hike those old bits of freeway and imagine what it was like back in the 30s or 40s when that road was built. Here's a typical coast scene. I guess it's just south of Devil's Slide. There's the tunnel. This is a great place to hang out on a cliff and work Hawaii or Japan with 5 watts and a whip. And this is one of my favorite shots. This is on the pier, waiting to take the ferry out to Catalina, which is also a fantastic place to operate. So you tell the XYL or your husband you're gonna go off and do a hike, right? But then you get there, you've got your radio and you've got beautiful scenery all around, and there's a fantastic hike. You start at the Wrigley, the Wrigley Museum it's just outside the city proper, Catalina, and there's this great couple of mile hike up into the hills, and from there you can see the entire island, Catalina. And you know, sometimes it's about the wildlife. I have kind of specialized in catching lizards since I was a kid. This little fat guy I caught here on the left, he was obviously not happy about it, but I do catch and release with the lizards, which is also what I do with my amateur radio contacts. Catch and release. It's kind of like fishing. Somebody, in fact, Steve, WG0AT, who is one of the field testers for our current little radio product that we just came out with, Steve said that you know, he very much feels like he's fly fishing when he's using this new radio. It's got a 4-foot whip on it. Hey, that's, you know, like cast and see what you get. The ocean's full of interesting signals. Throw them back when you're done with them. On the right, this is one I did not catch. That is a male chuckawalla. And you know, you've probably seen the big black female chuckawallas, but I had never seen a male chuckawalla. And at first I thought I had discovered a new species. Oh, and by the way, that was in Valley of Fire, Nevada, which is an absolutely fantastic place. It's about an hour northeast of Las Vegas. The hotel rooms in the little town out there, oh, bullet holes in the door to the bathroom, and a honky-tonk piano in the office that took up most of the office space. But it's worth it just to see Valley of Fire. Here's a great quote. This is from my dad, who was WB6CIC, after I convinced him that he would have fun, you know, more fun if he, you know, got his AM license. So my dad said, always leave it cleaner than you found it. And I think it's probably the genesis of my environmental streak, is that, I'm always thinking, I'm gonna pick that piece of trash up. But from an amateur radio standpoint, I've kind of retranslated that into something I'm calling zero footprint HF. So, you get in and get out, you don't leave wires and weights hanging in a tree, you don't disturb the wildlife, you don't cause a big ruckus, the tourists don't even know you're there, the rangers don't care. This is zero footprint HF. Thank you, Dad. So one of our field testers for our newest product, who's Rob Cape on W3DX, he said, Wayne, don't talk about your newest radio as a rig, talk about it as a station, because that's really what it is. And I'll talk more about this later, but this is a KH1 with the cover closed and the keyer paddle plugged in and the whip attached, and I wrapped the counterpoise wire around it, and the whole thing just fits in any pocket of my pants. And it's basically, it just disappears, it's small. So it's unobtrusive. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about the ergonomic challenges of how people have tried to deal with this notion of portable HF operation that just kind of is invisible, so it doesn't get in the way of all the other things you're trying to do. Your hiking, your camping, your adventure travel. In particular, I want to talk about how you can make a UI that works for CW operation. And I'll talk more about why CW is cool for this, but it's an interesting challenge to make a radio that is really ergonomically suited to CW operation. It's like an HT, but different from an HT. And we spent a lot of time dialing in all of these affordances to make it really ideal for this application. Now I'm going to show you some counter examples. So this is what I'm not talking about, okay? Starting with myself on the right, and Eric on WA6HHQ, my co-founder of Elecraft. So here we are at field day, I don't know, I think it was probably 1994, 95, something like that. Or no, it had to be a little later than that because there's a K2 in the picture, so it's probably 97. But as you can see, we've got a smorgasbord of equipment there. The watt meters, the antenna switches, the manual antenna tuners, the keyer paddles, the log sheets, the radio itself, clipboards, beer cans, right? And so it takes a whole table to support traditional amateur radio operation for field day. But Eric and I bonded over that, and on the backs of napkins, we designed the K2, and we realized the K2 could put all that stuff inside one box, including the antenna switch and the watt meter and the keyer paddle. Everything could be inside one little box. And so we started working on that around the time this photo was shot. These poor guys, I've shown this slide before, you've probably seen it before, but again, this is a good way to rack up chiropractor bills. This is not a good way to operate portable amateur radio. I think they're Canadian. That has nothing to do with it, but you see they've gone to a lot of trouble to bring a lot of equipment up to the top of a hill. So, like I said, I've been spending my whole career trying to avoid this. But then, do we have a few K4 owners out there? A couple? Yeah, so the K4 is like the opposite end of the spectrum. This is our big desktop radio. This is the one that you use when you're in your shack. And the K4 is not a portable radio, but because it's me, and because I do this kind of stuff for fun, I put a 7 amp hour gel cell inside there in the radio and attached a whip to it and carried it around. And hopefully I'm the only one who's ever done that. This is me at Bedwell Bayfront Park actually making contacts on an AX1 antenna with the K4, and fortunately nobody saw me do it except my son who took the picture. But you end up carrying a lot of stuff with you when you're out portable, at least traditionally. And so on the left, or here we have my KX1 outfit. So this is all the stuff that I carried around to put a station on. Now, even though the KX1 has a fairly high degree of integration, I mean, it's got a little tiny auto tuner in it and a little battery, I still found myself carrying all this external stuff. I've got, wires and whips and weights to throw into the tree. Keyer paddle is, like less sophisticated. I've got all kinds of adapters. So again, and there's no speaker in it, so it's like, even though in fact, the KH1 is actually smaller than the KX1, but this thing's 5 bands. And the KX1, you can shoehorn up to 4 bands in it, but it's only a couple of watts, and the battery is pretty puny compared to the battery that's in this thing. So I had to carry all this other stuff, and I'm not the only one. People send me pictures of their nicely arranged collection of stuff. Here's a couple of other examples. Some of our competitors' radios can be seen in these photos. Here's a nice collection. This is a KX3 station. This was probably for a de-expedition, but I mean, you can carry a lot of gear, or you can carry almost nothing. And if somebody recognizes one of these photos and realizes that I pulled it off the web without attribution, I don't want to hear about it. Now, some people carry so much stuff that they need pack goats. This is Steve, WG0AT, but the good news is that Steve now has a KH1, and it's a good thing because one of his goats passed away, and he can't carry as much stuff anymore. So he says that the KH1 has transformed his operation. In fact, at the time he was posting to me about how the KH1 had changed his life, he said, "My wife's in the bathroom. That's why I'm able to talk to you and get on the air," right? So one of the ways that this kind of revolution has been facilitated is that we've got lots of people who are willing to use low power. And it's actually, it's kind of a no-brainer actually. I mean, when I was about 15, I spent most of my time using an old Elecraft's HT37, big old monstrous desktop transmitter, and I had an SX111 receiver. And then one day, I just popped the finals out of the HT37, and just the little driver stages, I was getting 200 milliwatts out, and I thought, what the heck, I'm going to try this. And I was working stations all over the country with 200 milliwatts, so I kind of got hooked. But what really did it for me was this picture. Yeah, you guys have seen this? Yeah, so this is in solid state design for the radio amateur, Wes Hayward and Doug DeMaw, and that's Wes holding a little tiny radio that he called the Micro Mountaineer. And I built my own copy of that. It's a very simple rig. It's 40 meters direct conversion, half a watt, a little push button key, and a couple of crystals with a switch. But I was just fascinated with this idea that you could get on the air with such a small rig. Now, a lot of other companies have waded into this pool, like how can you make an HF-HT? So on the left side, we have one of the classic Mizuho handhelds. They made these, they're little single band radios. They put out about 3 watts. They've got, 8 AA cells, a little tiny push button key, and a VXO tuned receiver, so it covered maybe 50 kilohertz. Those were a lot of fun, and that was another model for what I've been trying to do is get everything into one little handheld unit. On the right is a Tokyo high power unit that covers 40, 15, and 6. But again, these are not full station solutions. You still got to bring a lot of stuff with you if you want to actually get on CW. You want to be able to use quick deployment antennas. Logging is a really fascinating topic here, and I'll talk more about that. Along the way, I started NorCal with a couple other guys, designed a few radios for NorCal, and kind of honed my craft. And later on, started Elecraft, and in fact, the bottom rig in this stack is the very first prototype of the Elecraft K2. So because I was able to do this semi-professionally, I had a lot of chances to to get out in the field and experiment, and so I'm very fortunate that my business partner was willing to run the company while I was exploring this design space. So when I really started getting into it, though, was this little radio called the Koala. This is it's a little bit smaller, like about maybe 15% smaller than a KH1, and it has two 9-volt batteries inside, and it's got a keyer paddle, and a little microcontroller, and a VXO, and it actually put out, I think, half a watt. What was I getting at? Yeah, half a watt with a couple alkaline batteries. And I just took up a dipole antenna to it, and that was a lot of fun, but I wanted more than that. And I think it was around 2001 when I woke up and I had this like realization. I'd been dreaming about like a little QRP rig, and how am I going to attach a paddle to it and make it usable? And what I realized was that I could attach the paddle at a 45-degree angle. And so that was the kind of the genesis of the KX1, which was Elecraft's first serious foray into what we call trail-friendly radios, or TFRs. So KX1, people had a lot of fun with it. Fairly simple little receiver, but it did have a keyer paddle built in and a tiny auto tuner and a simple little 6-cell battery. And there I am actually using the KH1 or KX1 out in the field. And you'll notice it has an LED display, which you're thinking, wow, that's going to suck a lot of battery power, right? But it turns out that these LEDs only use 1 milliamp per segment. They're like what's called ultra bright orange, which the human eye sees really well. Of course, then we kept pushing the envelope. So here's a KX3. This is our high performance kind of desktop TFR. A lot of people use this as their home station. And I actually, even though it weighs 2 pounds, it's a little heavy for handheld. Nonetheless, I would hold it in my hand. Here I am at Pinnacles, using it with a wire and a tree, which is, that's the classic portable antenna. Just toss a wire in a tree and let the automatic antenna tuner do all the work. Then a few years later, 4 years later, I was in Dayton, and I was with one of my senior RF engineers at the time, Rich Hynek, and we were riding a cab back to the Dayton airport, and I said, Rich, do you think we could shrink the KX3 by 50%? And, drop a couple of bands? What do you think? And he said, yeah, I think we could do that. So we spent all of 2015 cutting the size of the KX3 in half. And the result is the KX2, that's our all band, all mode, miniature SOTA and camping radio. Again, it's small and lightweight, but what I've discovered over the years is that even the KX2 is really too heavy to be used handheld for any length of time. So I continue to have this motivation to reduce the size and weight of the radio, and also find a way to do paper logging in the field, because I really like using the paper log. So I'll get into that some more. Here's a comparison of the size of the KX2 versus the KX3. And this is one of my all-time favorite pictures. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Wes Hayward, W7ZOI. He's kind of like the old man of the sea. When I first met Wes at a trade show, he accused me of stunting the growth of future engineers by offering kits and prefabricated circuit boards. And I said, Wes, I built a lot of Heath kits and it didn't stunt my growth as an engineer. He laughed it off. Then years later, Wes and I started talking about stuff. He'd seen some of my later designs, and I guess he forgave me for my violations of his extreme engineering protocol. But his son bought him a KX2. And then Wes sent me this picture of the KX2 sitting on top of the Micro Mountaineer that was in that photo from 1980 something from Solid State Design. And that, I don't know what the rig is below it, but this is, like Wes's homebrew gear, which is fantastic stuff. He's meticulous, and he paved the way for a lot of us who are interested in this area. But I just love the fact that the all-band, all-mode KX2 is the same size as his 40-meter crystal-controlled Micro Mountaineer, and Wes loved the irony of it, and he really likes his KX2. So I kind of feel like things came full circle at that point. And there I am holding a KX2, and we have these at the booth, of course, on the exhibit floor. But it's 80 through 10 meters. It's got an SDR architecture, so it's all modes, and it does all kinds of translation. It does PSK31. It does RTTY. So the KX2 has been kind of a SOTA radio of choice for all mode SOTA operation. It'll also do AM, it'll do FM. It slices and dices. But and when I created this slide, I was thinking, you know what? At 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, will people already have heard about the KH1? And Margaret, my sales manager, said, yes, Wayne. They will know about the KH1 by then, so go ahead and put it in your presentation. So I like having these slides back to back. So there is the KX2 with its weight of 22 ounces, counting the battery, and you can see the size there, 1.5 by 2.8 by 5.8 inches. And the tuner and the battery, and then this slide kind of explains what the essential differences are between a KX2 and a KH1. So in fact, the KH1 is, it's a new product line for us, right? The H is for handheld. And again, this is all about finding the sweet spot between your travel, your hanging out in your campsite, in your tent, going for hikes, or like I do, dangling from a cliff, or climbing a tree. I still want to be able to operate from these places. So the KH1 is half the size, half the weight, half the number of bands, half the power output, and half the price. So this is, who was the, George Carlin, if George Carlin were here, he'd say it's something like half the weight, half the size, and half the price. Of course, he was also the guy who said, what if you had a 2-minute warning? What would you do? 2 minutes before you die. This is like George Carlin's whole shtick. So this is our attempt to downsize even the KX2. The KX2 wasn't small enough, so for the kind of super light operation that I do, I wanted something that would not make my wrist tired when I'm holding it, when I'm doing pedestrian mobile operations. So that's the KH1, which I'm going to go into more detail about how we solved the ergonomic challenges that I mentioned earlier. Here's an X-ray view of a KH1, and as you can see, it's mostly battery. There's one main circuit board, and then over here on the left side, we have, over there's the automatic antenna tuner module, and on the right side, we have the battery charger. But it's tight. There's not a spare cubic centimeter inside this thing anywhere. Okay, we're in part 2 of the travelogue, a little bit more of my kind of travel photography. Again, keep thinking out of the shack, out of the shack. You don't have to operate amateur radio in the shack at all times. So here is some more stuff from Valley of Fire. This is a place called the Fire Wave. It's just these fantastic rock formations with beautiful colors and arches, gorgeous desert scenery. And the reason why the KH1 is great in a place like this, I think I may have mentioned that, tourists, right? Places like this are crawling with tourists. You've got rangers. There aren't any trees, right? So if you want to get on the air really quickly, you need something that has its own built-in antenna. Similarly, here's a scene from Yosemite, and there's this fantastic trail that goes up the side of this block of granite, and there is no way to put up an antenna unless you have a whip. Here's a couple of other fun places. this is a ghost town out on the border between Nevada and California. I think it's on the east side of Death Valley, and fun place. And you know, when the rest of the crew is off sightseeing, yeah, I'm going to check out the RF here. What does it sound like to operate from Nevada? The one on the right is one of these funny places that my son Griffin and I found when we were exploring these back roads on the way to Yosemite. This is a sunset. Yeah, I apologize for my iPhone 7's low resolution there. I kind of refused to upgrade until the camera's a hell of a lot better. But this is from a field day operation. The Baynet guys used to have for many years done a field day operation at Mockingbird State Park, County Park, just south of San Jose. And we had fantastic sunsets from our operating position. And you know, while everybody else was operating 100 watts with the beam and all that, I would grab my KX2, put a whip on it, and go out in the parking lot or hike up the hill and make contacts, just because. There's my son Griffin using a KX2 on top of Sierra Buttes. And has anybody ever been to Sierra Buttes before? Yeah. So if you look at a map of the Sierras, what you see is that there's this string of pearls. At the low end, you've got, the first pearl is Mount Whitney, down in the south. Then you've got Lake Tahoe, and Yosemite, and then you've got Sierra Buttes right in the middle of all this. Then you've got Mount Lassen, and then Shasta over on to the west. And from Sierra Buttes at 9,900 feet, where we're standing right there, you can see Mount Shasta, Mount Lassen, and the granite blocks above Yosemite, all from that one place. You've got a 75-mile view when it's clear for 360 degrees. So how do you make a radio with a user interface that actually works for the majority of SOTA HF contacts, which are done still on CW because it has such an advantage over sideband in terms of signal noise ratio. And you know, one approach is to make an HT, but the real issue here, and a real reason why I wanted to make a CW HT is because there just frequently is no place to sit on a trail. Anybody ever get ant bites or spider bites when you're trying to operate outdoors? Oh my God. This is a good reason to keep moving while you're operating, and that's pedestrian mobile. But you know, in the wintertime, there's mud, there's snow and ice, you know, there's all kinds of hostile plants on this planet that do not want you to sit down or even walk through them. So, so the idea is like, I want a radio that's lightweight enough that I can actually do some HF without being killed by nature. So with that as motivation, I'm looking at an HT format, right? Something I can hold. Here's an example of a good old-fashioned HT. Now, the funny thing about this HT, which has the knobs on the top, you know, which is fine for FM, and it's okay for sideband. It doesn't work for CW. But does anybody recognize this HT? I recognized it only after I read the description. This is the studio mock-up of an HT that they used in the movie Jurassic Park. And the reason why I used this photo instead of the billions of other photos of HTs that are on the web is because this one is non-denominational, right? Here's my HT. So this is it's small. I'm going to open the cover. So this the cover that you're seeing here is actually the logbook tray, and it acts as a cover for the radio when you're not using it, or if it starts raining, you can put the cover on and you can still use the AF gain control, the volume control, and the keyer paddle. But I'm going to open it up. Actually, I'm going to take the whip off.
That's slick.
So the log tray folds out, and
Look at
that's what those ceiling tiles are for. Fishing, right? Here's the question: like, how in the world can you log with an HT? And it took me a while to figure this out. Believe it or not, the 3D model for this thing is on its 304th iteration. I've been messing with this for a couple of years now, and been through several iterations on the logbook, and I'll get to more of that in a minute. But here's our solution to this equation, right? How can you operate handheld for SOTA, or just stealth, or just fun, right? QRP operation in the field. This thing is so light that it's not going to give you repetitive stress injury, like even like a KX3. Eventually, a KX3 you can hold for about 5 minutes. KX2 you can hold for maybe 10 minutes. This thing you can hold indefinitely. I think Steve WG0AT hasn't set his down for a week. He keeps sending pictures from everywhere he goes. So it's small and it's light. It's 13 ounces with the battery and the whip, the counterpoise wire, the keyer paddle, the battery charger, the ATU, everything. It only weighs 13 ounces, and so that's the main solution to the ergonomic challenge. One interesting aspect of any kind of SOTA-centric radio is, like, how do you put a keyer paddle on it? So this has a keyer paddle, and I will show you how this works. So if you look at the thing sideways, you can see that when the keyer paddle is actually in use, it's flipped up so that it's out of the way of the knobs, and it's about 3/4 of an inch between the knobs and the paddle. It's a smallish paddle, but it seems to do a good job. And now I'm going to unplug the paddle and then just flip it over. This is just a 3.5 millimeter jack like you use with any key. But when it's plugged in, as you can see now, we've got a nice slim profile, and that means I can put it in my pocket and it's not going to get damaged, and it'll just stay right there. Somebody set it for 8 words per minute. Okay. So the way I evaluate a new keyer paddle design is, can I send the entire alphabet at 30 words per minute without making a mistake? Okay, hang on. Can you hear that back there? Okay, I'll make it as loud as I can. Okay, and this is 500 hertz, but I'm going to make it.
Can I hold the microphone up to you?
Oh, you're going to hurt somebody. Okay, that's about the resonant frequency of the room right there, 670 hertz. I hope you can hear it. So we're at 30 words per minute. Okay, I have never done this test live before, so forgive me if I blow it, but here we go. Okay, one mistake.
So the keyer passes the test.
Was that a question?
I was saying so the keyer passes the test.
Yeah, the keyer paddle passes the test. It actually has a stiffer spring than our other keyer paddles, and a little bit wider spacing, because this thing is intended for high vibration use, right? So I'm typically walking around and like negotiate. Oh yeah. Sorry. This keyer paddle is really optimized for high vibration use. So walking, jogging, mobile, bicycle, kayak, right? So any situation, and believe it or not, there are people doing kayak CW. And I use the keyer paddle for not just actual operation, but because this thing has a built-in test mode, you can set it up to do code practice, and it will decode your transmissions and show them to you on the display. And it has a 32K double EEPROM, which is like a non-volatile storage device with 32,000 characters of storage. And if you put it into logging mode, then it will actually log all of your transmissions. And it time and date stamps those too. So that means that you can, when you get home, you can dump the log to a computer. But I also use it to just record field observations, put it in test mode when you're doing that, so you don't have to tell everybody in the world about your field observations. I have this slide. Why CW? Most of you, any CW operators in the room? Oh, good. Okay. Boy, am I relieved. So it's a high signal to noise ratio compared to sideband. The majority of HF SOTA contacts are still done in CW mode for that reason, and also because the equipment's like super light and 5 watts can get you there. When the band's open, it's open. Versus data modes, well, do you need a computer for this? No, just use your fingers, right? So it's the simplest possible way to get on data modes is CW, which is the original data mode. I think I may have mentioned this, but okay, so you can quickly change your code speed with a couple up-down buttons. It has message buffers, it has a speaker, which is nice, especially if you're like in a big hurry. And then it has this fun feature that I call the scan/mini pan feature. So let's say that you get to the place you're going and it seems like the band is dead, right? You want to just keep hiking. So, you put the antenna at half mast and you stick it in your pocket and you leave it in scan mode. And that way, if a station pops up, you'll either hear it as a blip going by while you're walking, or you'll see it in this pan adapter display mode. And it's hard to demo in here, but I can demo it at the booth. So it's basically kind of a poor man's mini pan. It shows 8 amplitude levels and 16 bins, and you can set it to scan anything from ±5 to ±20 kilohertz. So it can kind of help you open a dead band, something that seemed like a dead band but might not be. Okay, here we come to the challenge of logging. There are all kinds of hard ways to log. I'm going to show you a couple pictures. So here's my KX1 field day station on top of Henry Co. And I've got my table, my chair, I've got my clipboard, my wristwatch. This is about 20 years old. I think I'm not sure what kind of beer it is, but I guarantee you it's not an IPA. And there's a lot of wire and fussy stuff going on there with adapters and whatnot. Here's another way that people log. Sure, you can log with a computer. It's kind of hard to do while you're walking. This is a KX3 and a loop and a laptop and a backyard, and this is a lot of fun, right? But it's just not quite the kind of operation I want to do. And here's my first attempt to actually do paper logging in the field. This is a KX1 that has some log sheets on the back, and the hex or the thumb nuts there are strategically placed so it holds the log sheets in and you can pull them off. But as you can see, it's not a one-handed operation to do this. You can log with one hand, but you got to flip the radio over, and to change the log sheets, it's really messy. Now, over the past, 10 years or so, a lot of people have evolved kind of ad hoc field solutions for logging. So here's one example. This is very typical. A clipboard with a radio on it, and a separate little tuner gadget, and a separate clock, and some ad hoc log sheets. It's very typical. Early in the KH1 design process, we tried some different ways of doing this. So this is one early concept where the log tray is actually down here at the base of the radio, And that turned out to really not work that well. It kind of wobbles a bit, and it also didn't act as a cover for the radio when it's raining or when you're transporting it. And here's some other early concepts. So nobody makes a spiral-bound notepad the right size for this, so I had to cut down my own. And there it is, perched on a prototype KH1. The concept on the right was starting to get closer to what we ended up with. It has a little paper bale that's 3D printed along with the rest of the tray, and that's a space pen there. But still, it's not a one-handed operation to pull off one sheet and put another sheet on. So this is the final logbook solution, and it may seem obvious now to you guys, but it took me a while to figure out that the right way to do this is to have a loose leaf pad of log sheets. And we have a PDF file out on our website, so you can print as many of these as you want. But this is a 3D printed log tray, and it has these little bales, you know, at the top and bottom edges. And what it does is it keeps the log sheets from falling out. But the way you can do this with one hand is all you gotta do is take your thumb and peel one sheet off the top of the stack and tuck it back in underneath. And even that turns out to not be the simplest thing in the world. You have to actually put indentations in the plastic of the logbook tray. Okay, there's 2 places with indentations in the tray, so you can start by sticking a corner of the log sheet that you just finished, and then tuck the rest of it underneath, and that works really well. So finally, a solution to the logging problem. And as I mentioned, when you are not using the log tray, you can just fold it over. And in fact, you can continue to use the radio with the log tray folded over, because the controls you use most often, which are the keyer paddle, the AF gain control, and the VFO, all come out at the bottom, and they're still accessible even when the log tray is closed. You know, one of the best things about the log tray, though, is this. Hang on. You hear that?
Snaps closed.
That is a satisfying snap. I mean, mechanical engineering doesn't get any more fun than that. Now let's talk about antennas. So, you know, yeah, if you can bring your super antenna's 3-element portable beam out to your SOTA site, awesome. If you can get you know, like a 4JK or a rhombic out there, if you can, you know, bring 1,000 feet of wire, that's awesome, man. You can kick butt. Nobody will know your QRP if you can get an antenna like that into the field. But you can't walk at the same time, you know, you're just sort of stuck in one place. So, you know, a lot of us have evolved ways of quickly getting an antenna up out in the field. I like to call this the sort of vertical. Basically, you put a weight of any description, and believe me, I've used everything from stainless steel hex nuts, you know, I mean, don't use lead. Lead is toxic to wildlife. It's horrible stuff. We don't need any more of it in the environment, so don't use lead weights, please. So I use steel weights if I'm throwing a wire in a tree. You can go to Home Depot and get 1-inch, 1-ounce stainless steel weights. But keep in mind that each ounce, you know, like, adds a significant fraction to the weight of the station if you're talking about a KH1. I guess you could put them in a different pocket. Another kind of antenna that I've had a lot of fun with is what I call the inverted vertical. This is just one of many ways to erect an inverted vertical. Another of my favorites is to climb a tree and drop a wire from a tall branch. I'm sure a lot of you have used an inverted vertical from a hotel room, and you had no idea that this is actually described in the literature. Back to Steve WG0AT. Here he is, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, and you can see that he's got a nice efficient antenna here. I believe it's a buddy pole with, you know, so it's a vertical. He's got a counterpoise wire. He may even be using it as a dipole stand, actually. And he's on top of a mountain somewhere near Denver. This is another popular kind of antenna for soda use. Works great, you know, fishing pole. You just cast your wire out, it gets stuck in a rock somewhere, you gotta go retrieve it. Not always the easiest thing in the world to do, but it's a very, very good antenna because you've got a way of deploying it and also a way of getting a lot of wire out and having it be fairly tall. So this, you know, carbon fiber fishing poles are great for this. Again, it's not exactly peripatetic. Everybody doesn't know what the word peripatetic means? Okay, it means walking while you do stuff, okay? Speaking of which, this is Paul W0RW. He's constantly on the HF pack reflector with pictures like this of him, you know, like tromping around in the snow. I think he lives in Canada. Or no, he can't be living in Canada with that call sign. I don't know where he is. Anyway, Paul is a huge HF pack guy. And, you know, a few years ago, I tried to engage Paul in a discussion of something I was calling HF Pack Light, because he's carrying like 30 pounds of stuff. He's got a 20-pound radio and a 10-pound battery and his lunch and, you know, like chocolate bar. And I mean, he's carrying so much stuff that I don't know about you guys, but I already have a little bit of a back problem, you know, like I don't want to carry 30 pounds. On this topic, actually, I should mention that the KX2, which weighs 22 ounces with the battery and the antenna and everything, the KX2 has become a favorite of the Special Forces guys. We have several Special Forces commanders who are big advocates for the KX2. They've proved it for a common off-the-shelf or COTS purchase by the U.S. government, and they jump out of helicopters with KX2s now. I don't know if they'll use KH1s because it's CW only, but they love their KX2s. They operate from jungles, swamps, deserts, and one of the commanders said that the KX2 he's been using for several years has held up better than he has. In fact, he's retired now, and he's pushing HF use for the military full time. So HF may be making a comeback with the military. Now we do make a line of antennas. We've got the AX1, the AX2. These are small whip antennas. But again, there's more stuff you got to carry with you. So if you're going to be a purist about it and you want to absolutely minimize the stuff you carry, then maybe you want to only carry the whip. So nice thing about the KH1 is that the base loading coil is actually built into the rig. And there's a switch on the top that allows you to select either the 20 meter inductance or a 15 and 17 meter inductance. And the whip is bundled with the ATU option on purpose because you really need the ATU with electrically short whips. Otherwise, you know, your SWR is going to be high and you can end up fussing with it forever. But the nice thing about having the ATU inside the box is while you're walking around and your counterpoise wire gets snagged on a cactus, you know, or you're sitting down and it curls around your leg, or if your body capacitance changes for God knows whatever physiological reason that we don't want to go into right now, you can just hit the ATU button and it'll retune the thing. So having the ATU bundled with the whip just makes a lot of sense from our perspective. Here is a KX2 in action here with an AX1 whip. And this thing, I know some of you have probably seen it before, but this is something, I don't know, if you've ever shot a rifle while lying on your stomach, you know what this is. It's a bipod, right? You know, it's a tripod with two legs. And in fact, they even make monopods too, right? I mean, that might be an interesting way to support an antenna. In fact, people do that. They use a ski pole, right? That's a monopole. This is, or a monopod. This is a bipod. So it has two little adjustable legs on it, and in up to fairly moderate breezes, it'll keep the antenna and the rig from blowing over. Even the KX2 is a lightweight, so you might have to keep one hand on it, but it has some holes in the ends of the legs here so that you can actually strap it down with a bungee cord or thumbtacks or whatever you want. Now the KH1 has two different antenna connectors. It's got the usual B and C jacks, so you can connect your long wires, your dipoles, your EFHTs, or whatever the heck they are, those antennas that nobody has yet proven actually work, but they still make contacts. So you can connect that to your B and C jack, or you can connect the whip up, and the whip just screws into it, and like I said, the loading coil's on the inside. And the whip actually clips to the side, as I mentioned, which by the time you clip the whip to the side of the radio and then wrap your counterpoise wire around it, it's not going anywhere. And the ends of the counterpoise wire, you know how you've usually got like a dangling end of a wire when you wrap it around something? And you're thinking, what am I gonna do with this end of the wire? So we thought of that too. So the whip clips come with little serrated tips. Right here and here. They're little serrations, and so you can captivate the free end of the wire or your headphone cable. Just get it out of the way, and that means when you put it in your pocket, it's not gonna get unraveled. The top end of the KH1 looks like this, so you can see the B and C on the left. The B and C jack is always connected to the auto tuner. The whip is this nautical grade brass set screw. And we put a 1/2 inch long steel dowel pin through it. We modify the set screw, put a dowel pin through it so that when you tighten the whip, it doesn't rotate. It can't come in and out, and it can't rotate. It's very sturdy with a minimum amount of hardware. And the switch has a center off position. So if you're only gonna use the B and C, you put the switch in the center off position, then you can't get an RF burn off the whip post. Here's a little sneak peek at the interior. How are we doing for time?
1 minute to 9.
1 minute to 9? Oh my God, is there another show coming in here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna rapidly go through that. That's a sneak preview of the interior. Yeah, I already told you about making contacts with a whip. There's Steve with his new radio in Santa Cruz. And I would like to thank these guys, Rob Capon, my friend for 25 years, who's an expert on QRP stuff, and Fred, KT5X, Steve, WG0AT, and Rich Hynek, who helped me design this thing. And given that it's already so late, I know you got some questions, but we have to let the next group come in. So please save your questions for me at the Elecraft booth. And thank you very much.